So, learning to set limits while honoring kapwa, because kapwa includes us. And I understand that when we talk about kapwa, our shared inner self, our oneness as Filipinos, we often think it means always being understanding, giving, and accommodating. But what if honoring kapwa doesn't mean sacrificing yourself? What if kapwa also includes you? And that's what we'll explore today. So magandang hapon, umaga, or gabi po sa inyong lahat. I am Dr. Nette, Filipino American clinical psychologist and the founder of the Brown Psych and the Hilom Collective. In our work here, we ground ourselves in Kapwa psychology, and we understand the true connection is only possible when both the self and the others are recognized as fully human. So when we set a boundary, when you say no, or when you protect your peace, you are not breaking kapwa, you are honoring it. So let's start. You are not an outsider when it comes to the kapwa circle. Because I understand that sometimes we think that compassion, it means always flowing outward to parents, to siblings, co-workers. But kapwa is that beautiful circular thing. It's not like a one directional where we're just like giving and giving, right? Like it includes us in that compassion circle. And when Dr. Enriquez, who's the father of Filipino psychology or Psikolohiyang Pilipino, wrote about ibang tao, which means the outsider self, and hindi ibang tao, which means like, they're no longer separate from us. They're like one of us. This is really kapwa, the movement, between this, seeing others as part of us, but also remembering that we ourselves belong in that same sacred circle. And we often forget that. Sometimes I forget that when I say kapwa, because it has been distorted into what I call the false kapwa, because of so many reasons, like, colonization, like really the colonizers using that as a tool to be able to take advantage of us. This version of the self kapwa is rooted in guilt, in colonial conditioning, and fear of rejection. And that's why many of us overextend, overhelp, overgive, including myself, because we continue self erasure with love. So, for the members of the Hilom Collective, which by the way, we do have a live audience while recording this. So, I want to welcome our members of the Hilom Collective today, or THC, and they are joining us in this recording. And I have a reflection question for you, whether you are here right now or whether you're going to watch this in our recording or if you're watching this in our YouTube. When you think about your own relationships, have you been centering your idea of kapwa or others or also yourself? If you can jot a few words into the chat, I would love to read them because most of us grew up hearing wag kang makasarili, which means basically don't be selfish. And that phrase taught us early that our needs might be dangerous. But in Kapwa psychology, the self and others are not enemies. In fact, they're supposed to really coexist in mutual recognition. And we cannot really also truly practice compassion toward others if we consistently abandon yourself. And I think, personally, like growing up, because it was not explained to me this way. And even like in my own household, I was just like really taught to be selfless all the time. And I had like a really very distorted version of kapwa growing up. It's not until like I grew a lot older or even went to grad school when I understood that it also included me. And when I kind of like read the books on Filipino psychology, right? So when we set limits, you're not rejecting kapwa, you're maintaining it. You're saying, I want to stay connected and not at the cost of my peace. So if you think about it like this, like boundaries are really not walls. And I have had so many discussions with so many Filipinos that when I ask them, can you define boundary? Like, what does that mean when you say boundary? And they would often say that, oh, it's really this wall. I have built a wall because my family is just so toxic, right? And I have to explain to them that, of course, because like, there's actually, to be honest with you, different kinds of boundaries. So we have like the rigid boundary, and then you have the porous boundary, which a lot of Filipinos do have. And that is not to mock our culture. That is just like, if you look at the literature for boundaries, that's what it really kind of like alludes to. And I have like also other videos that I recorded about boundaries and the different types. And even in one of the videos I mentioned there about, Father Bulata, who is like a Filipino psychologist who's also a priest who also taught in Ateneo de Manila, but he kind of, described the Filipino humanity like this fried egg. We're kind of like the yellow blends almost like with the white. Because like in Western boundary, if you really think about it, it's kind of like the hard-boiled egg, where the white is really separate from the egg yolk. But for us Filipinos, it kind of, blends together. That's why boundaries can be really, really challenging. So again, boundaries are not walls, they are rhythm. And in our culture, our rhythm of healing has always included the togetherness and rests. And then we also have this thing called bayanihan, which if you are following like other Filipino social media accounts, it's always like mentioned there. This really means the communal support and pagpapahinga, which means rest. They're supposed to coexist. And healthy limits bring back that rhythm. So let's talk about something important because like I mentioned, boundaries really look very different when it comes to comparing that to like the Western culture. So in Western psychology, boundaries often mean what? Like what is the word that when you think of boundary for the Western, culture, what do you think of? I'm gonna check our comments over here before I go to that. All right. So, one member of our THC who is joining us live today mentioned everything I do centered around my family, but changing this every day. All right. Thank you. And then another member said, I do feel as though I put others, including my family and friends, ahead of myself and my needs, and learning to pour into me too. Yeah, that took me a long time to like really realize that hold on one second, like it's okay to include myself in that too, because it was like so blurry. And like as you know, I grew up in the Philippines and it was like so it's really porous, like it was really hard. And again, comparing the Western psychology to Filipino psychology, with us Filipinos, what it really means is like boundaries are about interdependence as opposed to the independence. Kind of like saying, I protect myself so I can stay connected without resentment. And Western boundaries tend to emphasize the individuality. Well, with us Filipinos, it's all about the kapwa, right? It's like it's very relational. It's not the me versus you. It's like it's me and you. And hopefully, as we decolonize and as we continue to heal, it's really kind of like a balance that we're now including ourselves in that mix. And that's also why we have THC, like workshops like this, teachings like this, so that we can remember. Like that is like one of the core values that we have here is to like just really go back and remember who we are. The Kapwa-Aligned Boundaries, the gentle, relational, rooted in respect and compassion. And this is also not to say, right? And I always put this disclaimer whenever I can, because sometimes people, I think, misinterpret when I say that, oh, what about the people who are toxic? What do we do with that? So, and especially like if it's kind of like a violation that's so abusive and that really, really tortures your soul. And I'm talking about like the physical, it could be emotional, it could be sexual violence that's happening. Like those kinds of boundaries, like really has to be rigid, right? And that, my friends, like please put on the walls. That's when we really need to kind of like be firm. And you're probably seeing that right now, right? Like if you are following what's happening in the Philippines, the type of boundaries, because we are so gentle and loving and forgiving, all of this got corrupt government officials, like what they usually do is like, they got caught, right? But then there's due process. And then they're going to get hospitalized. And then it will take years and years for the due process. And then after years and years, you know, what do you call this? They either go out of town, go out of the country, and then people just forget. And then the cycle begins again. And it's so related. Like you think that the politics and what's happening to us is not connected to mental health, all of it. Like, our mental health is like political. How can you not like see the connections? So when it comes to those corrupt government officials, I can see, I follow a lot of like the Filipino media accounts too. There are like really now understanding that we need rigid boundaries. Tama na, sobra na, right? Like this is already abuse. So that's when we need to put that rigid boundary, like I said. So when it comes to boundaries, we honor our humanity and everyone wins because like we're supposed to be included in that. And if you want to go deeper in this, we have several boundary videos now in the Brown Psych. I should probably like really create the playlist for that because we have quite a bit because this is such an important topic for our mental wellness. And there's, like why Filipinos struggle with boundaries and how to heal them, how to say no to parents and still be a good enough, check those out in our YouTube channel if you want to kind of go deeper in that. All right. So, how do we bring all of this into practice? One of the things is like we need to begin with mutual dignity. So when you set a limit, sure, like of course we're going to do it with care. I love our connection, but at the same time, it's okay for us to say that, you know what, like I can hang out and all that stuff, but I'm only going to hang out until like, I don't know, 10 o'clock p.m. because I also need time to recharge. This really keeps the kapwa alive, protecting both your peace and the relationship. And honestly, I understand because like this even happens with me. It's easier for us to set boundaries, I think, when it comes to our friends. Pero ang mahirap sometimes is really with our parents, right? Like who can relate to that? Can you give me a thumbs up? That it's harder like with our Filipino parents. Yes, yeah. Our THC members are giving a thumbs up. All right. The second one is like to name your loob or your inner world. So ask what's happening in your loob right now. Am I saying yes from love or am I saying yes because of fear? Right? Boundary really starts from the loob. The loob just like means if you don't understand Tagalog, is like you're inside. And I also talk about the loob, the labas. These are part of like Filipino psychology in the other YouTube videos. And there's like a great video that we can connect with this, with this recording later on. And then the next one is like replace obligation with choice. So there is this thing called malayang loob, which means free will. And if your giving doesn't come from freedom, is that really compassion? Or is that really just compliance or blind obedience? So inside the Hilom Collective, our boundary and inner child workshops, can also guide you through this. Like in each of the workshops, especially like the inner child workshops, if you haven't been into one of those, like this is kind of like one of our core topics all the time, really to learn to honor both the freedom and connection. And if it's not explicitly mentioned in our workshops, the way that we do the inner child workshops, I really invite you all to check those out because like those are the foundations, right? This healthy boundary that we're trying to achieve. So for those who are joining, I have a question for you. What happens in your body? And again, if you're watching this in YouTube, you can answer this reflection in the comments below. What happens in your body when you start to say no? Do you feel your chest tighten or your throat close or your stomach twist? Because that's our nervous system remembering old danger. And noticing it is the first act of healing. All right, so I'm going to look at the chat real quick before we go to the next portion. Someone said, I feel my shoulders tense up. Yeah. And then someone commented also earlier, thinking about the Western view on boundaries, I think a lot about independence and not sharing my struggles. That's right. Not asking for help, being very self reliant. Ooh, yes, I can relate. Some positives would be that there's less worry about what the family will say and think because it's my life. And it's interesting that you said that because like I even had like a recent something kind of was like like happened between me and my husband because I was like I'm like you. This is I'm pertaining to the THC member who just commented. Like I think I'm so used to the self-reliance to the point that even if my plate is already so full and I know that I can ask for help, it was like the other day when this happened when I was like working on a project and I'm like and then my husband was working at home And it's not automatic for me to just like, oh, honey, can you do me a favor? It's just really putting something in a form. And that's it because I had so many things already happening. And I kind of like caught myself and I kind of had to reflect that moment because I'm like, oh my gosh, I am just like so. So I can relate to what you're saying that we're just so trained to be self reliant, right? Oh, yeah, very relatable. Okay. And then someone said, I definitely get anxious when I say no and my heart beats faster. Thank you for sharing to our Hilom Collective members who are joining us live today. So, and again, if you like also a free guide on how to practice boundaries, because we have an ebook called Navigating Boundaries. And that is also going to be, we're going to put that in the description below. So if you need scripts, journal prompts, and Filipino metaphors to help you set limit without guilt, check out that free ebook that we made especially for you. All right. Every boundary begins in childhood. And if our inner child learned that no leads to punishment, especially, right? Or sinigawan ka or pinagalitan ka, which means like someone yelled at you, like you were lectured, right? After like creating a boundary. I mean, of course, like as adults now, we have to kind of like somehow rewire our nervous system. And the adult you might learn that, oh my gosh, like am I being disrespectful kasi pinagalitan ka after you set that boundary, like someone got mad at you, right? So like our nervous system remembers that. And the adult you might fear losing love when we set limits. And this is why these are some of the core things that we work here in the Hilom Collective with our inner child workshops, why we do all of the different steps, on how to kind of like rewire our brain. We have like many different workshops that teaches us on how to talk to our inner child with compassion, and all of those different stuff. So through inner child healing workshops where we practice, this emotional regulation, boundary setting, and kapwa connection in real time, because these are legit. Like it took me so long to really understand that it's okay to set boundaries. And boy, the things that all the heartache that it would have saved me if I knew how to set boundaries growing up. And especially with us too now, like as adults, like we have kids, some of our members here have kids. And if you're watching this and you have kids, like, would you not teach your like kid to have boundary? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so important. Like, how can you have this thing called mental wellness if you don't know how to set boundary? All right. So if you're watching this later, don't forget to check out our other boundary focused videos on the Brown Psych YouTube channel for more stories, psychology, and practical examples. And if this teaching resonated with you, you'll want to watch our next video. This is a good one when you go no contact with your Filipino family. This was actually our previous, like last month's, like Q&A that a THC member, the Hilom Collective member, asked. And it's a tender but necessary follow-up because sometimes setting limits isn't enough and distance becomes part of love. And we'll talk about what it means, how to grieve, and how to stay rooted in kapwa even when connection changes. Because sometimes, like there are like instances like when even in my private practice clients, right? Like that's how they heal if they take a break for a little bit. And there is some folks, there are some adult Filipinos who decide to kind of like either they want to prolong that no contact with their family, and then there are some that are like they just need to pause and then like with the intention of going back. And then there are also some, I mean, like depending on the severity of like the abuse that they experience, that they really no longer want to have contact. So each of us, like we have our own healing journey, and there is no judgment, because like you are the expert in your healing. So again, this is Dr. Net reminding you that our healing is our resistance and that kapwa includes you. So maraming salamat for being here, and I will see you on the next one.